My mom once told me I wouldn't fit in at her 40th anniversary party. It's couples only, she said sweetly, right before cashing the $5,000 I'd sent that month for Dad's medication. I didn't think much of it at first. I was used to it. The distance, the guilt trips, the quiet expectation that I'd always show up for them. Financially, if not in person. But this time felt different. Maybe it was the way her voice lingered on the words, "you wouldn't fit in," like I was some outsider to the family I'd been breaking my back to support. A few days later, my sister Melanie posted the party photos on Instagram. Chandeliers, champagne towers, black tie, everything. 250 guests, tuxedos, live band, the kind of event you see in glossy magazines. And there in the corner of the invitation was my name. Not on the guest list, but under platinum sponsors. That one hit harder than any insult ever could. I wasn't invited, but my money was. I tried to brush it off. Trauma surgery has a way of numbing you to emotional pain. At least that's what I told myself. But during one late night shift, while scrubbing out after 14 hours on my feet, I got a voicemail. It was my mom's voice, sharp, almost playful, and she wasn't talking to me. "Chris is such an easy mark," she laughed. Our personal ATM with a medical degree. Laughter in the background. Another woman chimed in, and then my mom again, her tone dripping with smugness. "He still thinks Victor's meds cost thousands. That guilt of his will pay for our retirement." I replayed that message 3 times. By the third, I wasn't even angry anymore, just hollow. The kind of silence that feels too heavy for words. 2 days later, a letter arrived from the bank. A $250,000 line of credit opened under my name. Co-signed by my parents, my forged signature staring back at me. They hadn't just used my guilt anymore. They'd stolen my identity. When I took it to the police, the detective gave me that practiced family drama look. "If it's family, it might be civil," he said. "Try mediation." Mediation, as if calling me their ATM and forging a loan wasn't theft, just a misunderstanding over dinner. That night, I sat on my living room floor surrounded by years of paperwork, tax forms, wire receipts, bank statements. Every $5,000 transfer I'd made, every emergency they'd spun. But as I traced each deposit, the story didn't add up. The money never went where they said it did. Not to the hospital. Not to Dad's prescriptions. It went to them. To dinners, to vacations, to a gala I wasn't even allowed to attend. That was the moment something inside me shifted. The good son was gone. And for the first time in my life, I stopped trying to save them. He'd said the pills cost over $1,000 a month, and I'd never questioned it. Instead of calling the pharmacy, I pulled the explanation of benefits from his Part D portal. The login my parents had given me years ago to help with paperwork. The numbers were blunt. With Medicare Part D, his monthly out-of-pocket was $87.46, and it had been for years. Next, the house. The mortgage was supposed to be crippling them. I'd heard that excuse since residency. A visit to the Cook County Recorder of Deeds site showed the truth. The mortgage had been fully paid off 8 years ago. Even worse, they'd refinanced the property twice since then, pulling out more than $600,000 in cash equity. That money was nowhere in their accounts now. I moved on to loan records. A background check on my own credit history turned my stomach. 2 SBA small business loans, one for $75,000, another for $125,000, had been issued in my name over the past 2 years. The listed business, a digital wellness startup registered to an address in my parents' neighborhood. I'd never even heard of it. I needed help. Someone who could go deeper than public records. That's when I called Daniel Rios. Daniel and I met in college. He'd gone into cybersecurity working for a private firm that specialized in tracking stolen funds and building financial fraud cases. When I explained the situation, there was no hesitation. "Bring everything," he said. "We'll map the flow." We spent the next 2 nights in his office, walls lined with whiteboards and monitors, streaming data. I handed him my documents and he started digging. Daniel started by mapping the outflows from my transfers, recipient banks, dates, and reference numbers just from my own statements. The money jumped to a small Nevada bank and then split some into a brokerage, some into high-end retail, and some to wire recipients overseas. We could see where the wires landed, but not who really owned the destination accounts. That part took legal process. Once the subpoenas hit, the banks produced KYC packets and ownership records. That's when the shell companies surfaced. Variations on my mother's maiden name and the offshore accounts tied back to them. One domestic recipient called itself a charitable foundation raising money for cardiac patients. On paper, it existed. In reality, it had no staff, no programs, and no board beyond a single incorporator. It was a pass-through. This is organized, Daniel said, scrolling through another layer of data. And if they used your identity to open those SBA loans, we're looking at federal crimes. Wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft, the whole package. He was right. I started researching Illinois law. Under 720 Illinois compiled statutes 51630, identity theft involving over $100,000 is a Class 1 felony, 4 to 15 years in prison. Wire fraud under 18 U.S.C. Section 1343 could mean 20 years. Mail fraud under Section 1341 of Title 18 of the United States Code. Same penalty. Even the fake charity fell under IRS criminal code for nonprofit misrepresentation. The deeper we dug, the uglier it became. They'd siphoned my money into brokerage accounts to fund speculative crypto trades. They'd purchased high-end furniture and charged it to a credit line created with my social security number. They'd even made down payments on a lake house in Wisconsin in my name. They didn't just drain you, Daniel said, leaning back from the screen. They built a whole lifestyle around you. It hit me then. This wasn't desperation. It wasn't even greed. It was entitlement turned into a system. They believed they had a right to my income, my credit, and my future. And they'd structured their lives around that belief. By the time we wrapped for the night, our initial review flagged roughly $600,000 in suspect flows, some of which overlapped with the $250,000 in fraudulent loans and nearly $180,000 funneled through the fake charity. And that was just the surface. The evidence was irrefutable. Every lie they told, every emergency, every debt, every bill was part of a deliberate plan. They hadn't stumbled into fraud. They'd engineered it. But proof wasn't enough. If this was going to end, I needed more than documents. I needed to show them and the law that I wasn't their victim anymore. The next step wasn't gathering evidence. It was going on the offensive. The evidence Daniel and I uncovered was enough to put anyone behind bars. But if I expected my parents to panic or apologize, I was wrong. They doubled down. It started with a phone call from my mother. "You haven't sent the transfer this month," Helena said, her tone sharp. "Your father needs an experimental treatment. Insurance won't cover it. It's urgent." I didn't answer immediately. "What treatment?" "You don't need the details," she snapped. "Just send the money." I told her I knew about the insurance coverage, the real medication cost, the offshore accounts. The silence on the line lasted several seconds before she exhaled heavily. "You really are ungrateful," she hissed. "After everything we've done for you." Then she hung up. 2 days later, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, my father pushed his way into my apartment, his face flushed with anger. "What the hell are you doing?" Victor shouted. "Your mother's in tears. You're humiliating this family." "Humiliating?" I said, "By refusing to keep funding your lies." He jabbed a finger at me. "You don't talk to your parents like that. We raised you. We sacrificed everything. You wouldn't even be a doctor without us." Neighbors were peering into the hallway now, phones raised. Victor didn't care. He was in full performance mode. "You owe us," he shouted. "You owe us for your education, your childhood, everything. $5,000 a month is nothing compared to what we gave you." "Then call it even," I said, stepping back and pointing to the door. He cursed under his breath, slammed the door, and stormed down the hallway, neighbors peeking out, phones in hand, catching the whole thing like it was a free episode of family drama. I thought that would be the end of it. But I underestimated how far they'd go. Within days, the phone started ringing. First, my aunt. Her voice trembled with confusion. She'd lent my parents $30,000 last year after they told her I'd abandoned them, refused to help. Then my uncle called, another 20 grand gone, same story. They'd painted me as a selfish son, rolling in money and letting his parents starve. And every sympathy dollar they collected came wrapped in that same lie. But it didn't stop there. My sister Melanie called next, angry, emotional. She accused me of destroying our parents by turning on them publicly. When I told her they'd committed multiple felonies, she laughed. "It's not real crime," she said. "Family money stays in the family." The kind of denial that borders on madness. And then Sophia Morales called. Daniel had reached out to her earlier. She was an investigative reporter at the Chicago Tribune, known for ripping the masks off charity scams. Her voice was calm but firm. "There's a property in Lake Geneva," she said. "Waterfront, 4 bedrooms. Bought in your name 18 months ago." I froze. "That's impossible," I said. "I don't own property in Wisconsin." "Well," she replied, "according to the deed you do, and it's the collateral for that $250,000 loan." My forged signature was right there, printed under a mortgage worth nearly $800,000. Within hours, my bank froze 2 accounts, my credit score tanked by over 100 points, and debt collectors started calling about loans I'd never taken. Then came the final gut punch, a letter from the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. My medical license renewal was under review. The fraud, the loans, the investigations, they were all now part of my record. My career, everything I'd built, was bleeding out, all because of them. I called Daniel that night. My voice was shaking. "They're trying to burn it all down." "They're desperate," he said quietly. "They think if they destroy you, they can walk free." "Not this time," I told him. "I'm done reacting." And I meant it. We had the evidence. We had the trail. This wasn't just about stopping them anymore. It was about dismantling every lie they'd built. So I started planning. Every fake charity, every shell company, every stolen cent, I was going to drag it into the light, and I was going to do it publicly. September brought their moment of pride, a charity gala at the Art Institute of Chicago. 4 decades of service being celebrated under chandeliers and champagne. 300 guests, politicians, donors, doctors, all applauding my parents for their generosity. It was perfect. Daniel and I spent 2 weeks preparing the presentation, bank statements, property deeds, wire transfers, fake charity filings. Sophia even added screenshots and a voice message of my mother calling me their personal ATM. That would play last. The night of the gala, I wore the same black suit I'd worn at my medical school graduation. Not for the event, for the symbolism. I wanted them to see the man they'd tried to break and realize they'd failed. When we walked in, the applause was thunderous. My parents stood on stage, glowing under the lights, shaking hands with city officials. They had no idea what was coming. Then the lights dimmed. Our first slide appeared on the giant screen. I walked onto the stage, took the microphone, and said calmly, "My name is Dr. Chris Brennan. I wasn't invited tonight, but you deserve to know who you're honoring." My father's face drained of color. My mother froze mid-smile. Daniel clicked the next slide. A bank statement. My account. $5,000 a month every month for 3 years. "That's $180,000, I said, my voice echoing across the silent room. Money I sent to my parents because they told me they were drowning in medical debt. The next slide showed the truth. Their home had been paid off 8 years ago. Then came the refinancing documents. $600,000 withdrawn in cash.
"They told me they were about to lose their house," I said softly.
You could hear the air leave the room. They weren't about to lose their house, not even close. They'd refinanced it twice and pocketed the money. A low murmur rippled through the room. My father lunged for the microphone, face flushed, but I stepped aside and said quietly, "Sit down, Dad. You're going to want to hear this." The next slide hit the screen. Forged SBA loan documents, $200,000, my name and social security number on every page. Then came the property deed for the Lake Geneva house, the Cayman Islands account numbers, and the fake Heartstrong Foundation filings, all with my mother listed as director. "They used my identity to take out federal loans," I said, voice steady. "They opened shell companies, laundered money through a fake nonprofit, and bought property in my name. That's identity theft, wire fraud, bank fraud, money laundering, all federal crimes." Gasps filled the ballroom. Someone in the back shouted, "I gave money to that foundation." Another woman grabbed her purse and bolted for the exit, phone already pressed to her ear. I looked out at the stunned faces and said, "Maybe you're wondering why I'm saying all this here. Because this celebration, this gala, was paid for with stolen money. My money and yours." Then came the final clip, my mother's voice echoing through the speakers. "Chris is such an easy mark. Our personal ATM with a medical degree. Silence, heavy, electric." My father broke first. "He's lying," he yelled. "He's mentally unstable, jealous." My mother followed, trembling but defiant. "He's exaggerating everything. It's just family money. We raised him. We deserve something back." But no one was buying it. Faces around the room shifted, cousins, neighbors, donors, connecting dots in real time. One of my uncles stood up and shouted, "You borrowed $40,000 from me for medical bills. Was that a lie too?" Chaos erupted. Voices clashed. People demanded answers. My parents tried to slip off stage, but reporters, tipped off by Sophia, were already outside. Cameras flashed like lightning as we stepped into the hall. Dr. Brennan, is it true your parents defrauded you? Are you pressing charges? Were other family members involved? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. By morning, it was everywhere. Prestigious Chicago family accused of defrauding their own son in six-figure scheme. Screenshots of forged documents. The voicemail transcript. The fake charity. Social media detonated. Donations to Heartstrong vanished overnight. Sponsors pulled out. And the Brennans went from neighborhood royalty to a national punchline. But the backlash came fast. 3 days later, a courier dropped off an envelope at my door. A defamation lawsuit. My parents were suing me for $2 million, claiming I'd destroyed their reputation. That same afternoon, a detective left a voicemail. Helena Brennan had filed an elder abuse complaint. The accusation? That I was financially controlling, emotionally abusive, and denying them medical care. If proven, it could cost me not just my freedom, but my medical license. It was predictable, a desperate counterattack. Classic Brennan strategy. But this time I wasn't rattled. Because the difference between their lies and my story was evidence, and I had plenty. The next morning, I sat across from Rachel Kim, one of the top financial crime attorneys in Chicago. Calm, razor-sharp, and known for never losing a fraud case. She flipped through the folders Daniel and I had compiled. "They're cornered," she said, eyes scanning the documents. "That makes them dangerous, but also predictable. They're trying to rewrite the story before you control it." Rachel outlined the plan like a surgeon mapping an operation. We'd hit them with civil suits, fraud, conversion, unjust enrichment, breach of fiduciary duty, and emotional distress. At the same time, she'd refer the whole package to the feds. Wire fraud, bank fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, the works. By that afternoon, Rachel filed the civil case in Cook County and sent a full dossier to the FBI's Chicago field office and the IRS Criminal Division. 3 weeks later, federal prosecutors opened a joint investigation. Subpoenas went out to banks, brokerages, and the so-called charity. And then, the morning the headlines flipped again, the FBI raided my parents' house. It was early, gray outside. Agents carried out boxes of files, laptops, and 2 locked safes. Neighbors stood on porches whispering. And when I got the call from Rachel later that day, her voice was almost grim. "They found more than we expected," she said. What was inside those boxes? Was darker than anything we'd imagined. There were cryptocurrency wallets linked to transactions worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Shell companies, dozens of them, all registered under twisted versions of my mother's maiden name. Fake tax returns, forged charitable records, and emails that read like blueprints of deceit, proof they'd lied to nearly everyone in the family about medical expenses. And once that truth cracked open, it spread like wildfire. My sister's husband, Brad, filed for divorce within days. In his court filings, he accused Helena of forging his signature on loan applications, of lying to him about everything they owned. His testimony to federal investigators was devastating. "Helena masterminded everything," he said. "She told us Chris would never question it. He feels too guilty. We deserve the money because we have a family and he doesn't." That one line summed it all up. The entitlement, the manipulation, the years of quiet exploitation. What began as a suspicious $180,000 in monthly transfers ballooned into something massive. Once subpoenas rolled in, the total hit over $1 million. Stolen funds, fraudulent loans, fake charities, laundered investments. And it wasn't just my name they'd used. Relatives started stepping forward, my aunt, my cousin, each with their own story, their own betrayal. My aunt had given $40,000 for a hospital bill that never existed. My cousin had co-signed a line of credit that was drained dry. Every lie followed the same script. "Chris isn't helping. We need you to..." But the tide was turning. The legal weight shifted hard in my favor. The federal indictment list grew longer each week. Wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, identity theft. Every new charge pressed them deeper into the corner they'd built for themselves. Still, the Brennans fought dirty. My father stormed into my attorney's office one afternoon, shouting threats until security dragged him out. Helena sent an email to my hospital board accusing me of stealing family medical records. It was baseless, desperate. Rachel, my attorney, wasn't fazed. "Desperate people lash out," she said. But desperation doesn't change evidence. Then came another bombshell. While under investigation, my parents tried to refinance the Lake Geneva property again, this time using a shell company and a forged version of my signature. It was reckless, and it sealed their fate. The U.S. attorney called me in one morning. Her words were calm but final. "We've built enough for multiple felony indictments. Once we file, there's no walking this back." And in that moment, I felt it, the power shift. For the first time in my life, they couldn't manipulate, guilt, or silence me. The same arrogance that once made them untouchable was now their undoing. I looked over the evidence spread across Rachel's conference table. Forged SBA loans, fake charity filings, property deeds, emails, offshore accounts, hours of recorded calls. Every page, every signature, every keystroke was another nail in their defense. "This isn't about revenge," Rachel said softly. "It's about accountability." She was right. I didn't want to destroy them, I just wanted the truth to matter. And for the first time, it finally did. The Brennan name, once polished and proud, now stood for greed and fraud. Their friends stopped calling. Their lawyers stopped talking. Their empire, built on manipulation and deceit, was collapsing, and the reckoning was just beginning. 8 months later, the trial began. The U.S. District Court was packed, reporters, family, even old acquaintances who came just to see the fall. The government's case was relentless. 5 years of forged documents, laundered money, fake charities, and stolen identities. When prosecutors played the voicemail of my mother's laughter echoing through the courtroom, "Chris is such an easy mark." Our personal ATM. The room went silent. There was no coming back from that. Helena refused to testify, hiding behind the Fifth Amendment. My father, though, took the stand and destroyed himself. "I never saw it as stealing," he said. "Chris owes us. Everything he has is because of us." And with that, the prosecutor took him apart piece by piece. Every lie, every forged signature, every fabricated story laid bare. It wasn't revenge anymore, it was justice finally catching up. Yes, inequity. Yes, while receiving monthly transfers from your son, the questions echoed through the courtroom. And then came the final blow. Prosecutors revealed a shocking new discovery. Even after the indictment had been filed, my parents had tried again, refinancing the Lake Geneva property using a shell company and a forged signature in my name. The jury's faces hardened. This wasn't a one-time slip. This was ongoing, deliberate criminal intent. Their defense crumbled completely. Every claim that it was family money I owed them collapsed under the sheer weight of evidence. This wasn't confusion or misunderstanding. It was organized crime. The jury deliberated for 5 long hours. When they returned, the courtroom held its breath. 4 women stood and read the verdict. Guilty, identity theft, wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, money laundering. Helena's tears fell first. Victor stared straight ahead, jaw tight, unable or unwilling to process it. I didn't move. Satisfaction wasn't the point. This was a quiet, heavy finality. The damage they'd done would never be undone, but finally, there would be consequences. Sentencing came 3 months later. The courtroom was quieter now, tense with anticipation. The judge, a no-nonsense former prosecutor, delivered her words deliberately. "Victor and Helena Brennan," she said, "you systematically exploited your son's trust. You forged his identity, constructed a life of fraud, manipulated family and donors, and even attempted to continue your crimes after indictment." She let it sink in. 6 years in federal prison each. 3 years supervised release. All assets seized. Restitution of $250,000 to Dr. Chris Brennan. Months later, our civil case resolved. The court entered a judgment for additional damages. Helena sobbed quietly as the marshals cuffed her. Victor didn't flinch. He only glanced at the floor. I stepped outside into the cold Chicago air. Reporters shouted questions. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. The reckoning was over. The fallout was immediate. Headlines ran for weeks. The Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation closed my review with no action. The hospital reinstated my operating privileges. Life in Chicago finally felt like mine again. And then came the work that would turn pain into purpose. The government auctioned the seized assets. I bought the Lake Geneva house not to live in it, but to transform its story. The proceeds funded the Brennan Free Clinic on Chicago's South Side. What had been a monument to greed became a place of healing. Free care, preventative screenings, walk-in services, all funded by the money they tried to steal. Single parents, immigrants, people without insurance, they came to us in droves. On our busiest days, we treated more than 100 patients. With Daniel's help, I also launched a non-profit legal aid group, helping victims of family financial abuse. Every week, the waiting list grew. Finally, I was doing something bigger than my own life. I was protecting others from what I had endured. Sophia's book, Bloodline Theft, became a bestseller, then a documentary, shining a light on a form of abuse most people never talk about. My parents tried to reach out from prison. Helena's letters were filled with excuses. I left them unopened. Victor never wrote. Melanie's life crumbled. Divorce, financial ruin, a collapsed social media brand. A year later, she appeared outside the clinic one night. "I'm sorry," she said. "Can we start over?" I shook my head. "Family isn't blood. It's trust. You broke that." Her eyes filled with tears. "So that's it?" I said and walked away. 2 years after the clinic opened, we held a small anniversary. The building was packed with patients, staff, and volunteers. Daniel handed out pamphlets for the legal aid group. Sophia signed books in the lobby. I stood by the bronze plaque, the Brennan Free Clinic, founded 2027. What had once been a scar now felt like victory. "They tried to steal my future," I told the room. "All they did was forge my resolve." The applause wasn't just for me. It was for everyone who had turned their pain into purpose. For every patient finally able to see a doctor. For every victim who now had legal support. What had started as betrayal had grown into something larger, a mission, a purpose. Later that evening, I stepped outside the clinic and watched the sun sink low over the south side. The headlines had changed. I was no longer the defrauded doctor. Now, they called me the man who broke the cycle. And that was exactly what I had done. The cycle of guilt, manipulation, and obligation that once dictated every choice I made was gone. Helena and Victor still had years left to serve, but their future no longer belonged to me. By the time they were released, they would be convicted felons with nothing. No money, no property, no standing. Their chapter had closed. Some scars never fade completely, but they don't have to define you. My parents had tried to weaponize my love, my sense of duty, my guilt, but in the end, those same qualities became my strength. They forged someone unbreakable, clear, and beyond manipulation. The ledger was finally balanced, not because every dollar was returned, but because I had reclaimed everything they had tried to steal, my name, my purpose, my future. For the first time in years, I could breathe. Truly breathe. Without the weight of their lies holding me down. And as the sun dipped below the skyline, I realized this story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a warning, a lesson, and a beacon.